Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this Reboot 2030 podcast on rogue AI and catastrophic risk. My name is Nico Heller. My guest today is Yoshua Bengio. Yoshua is a full professor of computer science at the University of Quebec. He's also a founder and the scientific director of the MILA Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute, and is a senior fellow and co-director of the Learning in Machines and Brains program at the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. And of course, he's also the recipient of the 2018 AM Turing Award, the Nobel Prize of Computing, with Jeffrey Hinton and Jan LeCun. I can see that Yoshua has already arrived, so let me invite him in.
Hello.
Yoshua, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me for this Reboot 2030 podcast on rogue AI and catastrophic risk. I have already given a brief introduction, your background and achievements, and we can of course add to that during our conversation. But let's dig straight in here. You've been very vocal about the potential catastrophic, and I think the emphasis here is on catastrophic, the catastrophic risks, superhuman, and again the emphasis being on superhuman artificial intelligence systems pose for mankind, really at a societal level. What kind of risk are you talking about?
Well, there are many risks. They probably, are laid out at different timelines, but maybe the shorter term risk is the amplification of disinformation. So we already have deep learning being used in synthesizing images, sounds, and more short videos that are used in order to try, to change people's minds. But now we're going to see more progress on these synthetic ability, plus a new medium, which is dialogue, that can be added to all this, where if anybody's played with ChatGPT knows that these systems are pretty good at interacting with us in fluid ways that sound very convincing. So I'm not saying it is going to happen, but the tools are there, and there are certainly groups of people around the world who already are trying to use these tools. Are probably, at work right now to try to influence the elections that are coming in, this year and the next year. So that's one kind of risk, to destabilize democracies through influence. There's another kind of democratic issue, which may be slightly longer term, but I think we have to be worried about, which has to do with concentration of power. So as you know, right now, it's just a few companies doing it, and it might actually get worse in the sense that the costs of training the frontier, the top models, is going up exponentially fast in the last few years. And so the number of organizations that can actually train the best systems is, the bar is going to be higher. So I don't know, how that's going to go, because there's also another force, which is a lot of capital is being invested in this, which is going to accelerate the advances because more R&D is happening. But in any case, there's a risk as these AI systems become more powerful, that the people who control them will wield a lot of power, maybe more than we have ever known, as we approach AGI, like a level where these systems surpass humans on many fronts. And that is by definition in contradiction with the very notion of democracy, which is all about ways of sharing power.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, in Germany, where I'm based, there is a sort of a strong belief, and I believe that is also very strongly held in the US and Canada, that research, scientific research, should be free. So that that we should be able to and this goal is a kind of a Kantian kind of notion. It goes back a long way. It's an Enlightenment notion. This idea of freedom of research, and we have staked a lot on this, and people have quite entrenched position on this. And of course, you could argue that for as long as science was sort of, at a level where it couldn't fundamentally destroy or fundamentally change the makeup of the universe, that was okay, for as long as we didn't play God. But really, sort of from the early 20th century on, science progressed in a way that in many fields, this became an issue. And one of probably the first ones where we saw this was in the whole nuclear field, where we all of a sudden had this ability to destroy the world many times over. And this has now been replicated across many science domains and has finally arrived in the area of information science. Yes. And computing. But in what way is that new risk, the AI risk, different, say, from these other kind of severe society level risks?
Okay, so I talked about disinformation. The next threat is national security attacks. So cyber attacks, bioweapons, chemical weapons, and other things we don't think about right now. There are some studies showing that these systems, because they've read all of the scientific literature, even though they don't understand them as well as a scientist expert, they understand them enough to help somebody who's not an expert to figure out how to do dangerous things. Now, currently, the level of how much they help isn't a lot higher than if somebody took a lot of time and read from the internet and try to find scientific literature. But it could make it easier. And more importantly, I think we should think of next year's system, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. They could help terrorist groups, criminals. So right now, for example, already, if you go to the dark web, which I don't, but some of my students apparently do, you can buy or rent some of these AI systems that have been modified to take off all the safety protections so that they could be used to, write cyber attack codes or fraud and things like that. So there's already a market for using these systems for really nefarious reasons. And it's just going to get worse as these systems become more powerful. So that's national security, yeah.
Isn't it? I mean, you started off by sort of saying that the kind of, in a nutshell, if you were to sort of kind of try to kind of describe what that risk is, it's amplification. And wouldn't it be fair to say that these other society level risks, like sort of a nuclear fallout or kind of a biological war or whatever, that the AI actually in a way amplifies those risks? So it's, it's kind of, in a way, it's a risk in itself, but it's also an amplification of existing risk.
Yeah, and I think the case of bioweapons is a good example of that. So there's already a lot of scrutiny in biology. You can't publish anything you want. If it could be used in dangerous ways, then review boards, will discuss the question. And globally, we've created these BSL labs, BSL 1, 2, 3, 4, at different levels of potential danger to humanity. And not everyone is allowed in, these labs. You have to be trustworthy and know what you're doing and follow the right protocols. And in a way, what I and others are saying is that we need similar scrutiny and control of access to the very powerful AI systems that can be misused in very dangerous ways, or that we could lose control of. So this is the last risk, which maybe makes it different from things like nuclear or pandemics, human-created pandemics, in that we're talking about creating entities that would be smarter than us and could even improve themselves by studying AI. So actually, serious researchers in the field think that we could make progress to advance AI itself using AI Yeah, so the bootstrapping, because we are at the point where these systems are pretty good programmers, so they understand algorithms. So we're not very far off from the point where they could design better algorithms, for example, more efficient algorithms that can make a difference, computationally efficient algorithms.
Joshua, here I am again.
Hey, all right.
It really hasn't happened in a very, very long time. My internet literally just cocked out. I mean, not the what do you call it? Not the root up in my office, but the internet. Joshua, so we've been talking about this kind of new risk, this kind of catastrophic risk that AI, especially superhuman AI, poses. And you're introducing this idea of rogue AI, the idea of, and you're making it seem between two types of rogue AI, if I understand you correctly. There's the kind of the rogue AI, which is for, essentially kind of orchestrated by, developed by a malicious, kind of a bad actor, somebody who wants to do harm. Could be a terrorist, could be a power-hungry dictator, could be anybody who wants to harm society. And there's another kind of form of rogue AI, which has to do with us losing control of the AI, to do with sort of a misalignment, the AI essentially making a claim for a life of its own.
That's right.
Yeah. So maybe we sort of pick up from here, and why these particular sort of like forms of superhuman intelligence would be dangerous.
Okay. So the first kind is easy to understand. People will want to use any powerful tool for their advantage, and if they have malicious goals, and the tool is very dangerous, then we're in trouble. So that's the kind of a classical national security risk. Then there's the kind of new kind of national security risk where we have new entities that may have their own goals. So let's see how that could happen. There are two basic routes. One is intentional creation of a runaway AI, and the other is unintentional. So the intentional is easier to understand. There already are researchers out there that are saying that they would like to see humanity replaced by superhuman AIs. For them, the supreme value is intelligence. And so if these systems are going to be smarter than us, they should take over. And we should welcome them.
There's an interesting point. I mean, when I was reading your article earlier on a catastrophic risk once more, I kind of was thinking that because you're linking it very directly to democracy and the defense of democracy and the defense of human rights. Now, and you're making, and I think this is really the key to understanding why you consider it a problem, is to do with the concentration of power, and you're making this link to authoritarian regimes where a sort of all-knowing, sort of a supreme leader who feels he knows best and is convinced that he does, makes decisions that are suboptimal. Because there is
so that's the unintentional possibility. In other words, right now we don't know how to design the AI so that we will not lose control of it, that it not will become an entity with its own self-preservation goals. And it's going to take a lot of efforts and protocol and care in order to avoid doing that, and of course research to figure out these things. But if you're a dictator, your primary concern is to maintain your power, and you might be willing to take chances, just like criminals might be willing to take chances, because maybe you fear for your life, and if you have a choice between using the AI to maintain your power, or and taking a chance, or potentially losing it all, I think there's a sentence in French, "Après moi le déluge," which means "Who cares? Once I'm dead, everyone else can die." And so I think there's an issue that if we end up in a world where a kind of authoritarian government controls the most powerful AI, well, not only AI can be then used by them to maintain their power and prevent democracy from coming back, but also they might make a mistake because they're focused on their own power and their own security, and we could end up with an entity that's going to destroy us all. And there's also an interesting reason behind why this could happen more likely than if we have a democratic system in place to protect us, which is simply that authoritarian regimes are less intellectually robust, because there's one person, let's say, that dominates, and we can be wrong. Anybody can be wrong. In democracy, we're trying to aggregate the opinions of a lot of people. That's the whole point of democracy. And if one person can be wrong, but the aggregate is usually not too wrong, and maybe somebody will say, well, this is dangerous, so let's be a bit more careful, even though the other guys are not sure. So in general, democratic decisions are going to be safer, and that's exactly the issue here, that we might not be sufficiently careful if we consider just the whims of one person, than if we consider a democratic process that's going to take these decisions that could have impact on the whole of society and the future of humanity.
It's interesting. I mean, you're making I think one of the key concepts here is misalignment. It could be the misalignment between the operator and the creator of an AI system with the AI system. It could be a misalignment between the AI system and society at large, or it could be a misalignment between the creator, the actor, and society, or it could be all three. But misalignment here is the issue now. Now here's a kind of it may almost be a rhetorical question, because I think I understand why this isn't a solution, but I still want to kind of throw it out. Why don't we design AI systems that check for misalignment, so that so that we have an autocorrect?
Yeah.
I think you could give me the answer to. I have a sense that there could be misalignment in that too, couldn't it?
Well, so the problem is we don't know how to program or train or instruct an AI right now that will understand properly our intentions, that will understand our values and morals. I mean, they might partially understand, and so long as they're not too powerful, that mismatch, that misalignment may not be too serious. Like, you and I might not be perfectly aligned on everything. That's okay. Like, humans have different opinions. But if one of us was so powerful that he could kill the other, then that misalignment becomes a problem. So the misalignment is unfortunately a scientific challenge right now that we don't know how to solve. And in my opinion, it's something that we need to solve urgently before we end up with superhuman AI systems that we might want to do something good, but actually are going to harm us.
So, I mean, in a nutshell, what you're trying to do, I'm just trying to kind of define words that might express in a more sort of a, easy understand. So from my way of looking at it, what you kind of seem to try to do is to democratize AI, to find a kind of an equivalence, sort of systems equivalence to our human-made democratic governance arrangements. Is that kind of a fair way of putting it? So that we're kind of building similar checks and balances into the kind of sort of interrelated AI systems that are emerging. And you have an idea of how you propose to do this through a network of non-governmental organizations, isn't that right?
Yeah, so there are two aspects here. There's a technical aspect. Within the AI, we can use principles that we see at play in democracy, so that the AI itself is sort of a committee, and it can hear multiple opinions inside itself. And then, if one of the opinions say this is dangerous, then maybe, it's going to be prudent and play it safe. There's also democratic principles at play regarding the governance of the AI. We want a kind of democratic governance, because the AI is going to have a lot of power, or AIs, there will be many. We want to make sure that that power is kept in check, meaning that it's used in ways that are aligned with our democratic will. And for that, we need a democratic process, which you don't get by default in corporations, and just profit maximization. So the first step, of course, is to have a regulator that says, okay, you can do this, you can't do that. But that's not sufficient. We also eventually, I think, want democratic societies to have a much stronger control over how the AI is used, for what purposes. Are we making sure it's not going to harm some groups of people, and we're not going to lose control because we're not safe. I mean, we're not careful enough and all that. And we want those decisions to be taken with the wisdom of the crowd rather than the whims of a CEO.
So and it's interesting because, of course, in terms of harm or severe harm for society, there are certain behaviors which we as societies in the West encourage, like profit seeking, for example. It's the very basis of our capitalist structure is that we want to become better off. We want to, we want to accumulate wealth, and with that, we think we accumulate security and well-being and all the rest. So, but we want to accumulate wealth, and that's a legitimate pursuit in our. But what if that pursuit of accumulation leads to a concentration never seen before, at which point it flicks, doesn't it? It's actually no longer a benefit to society.
Exactly.
It's actually no longer a benefit to that individual either. It becomes a self-harming pursuit, potentially.
Yeah.
Because of course, if it leads to a kind of a meltdown, then of course that would also be harmed. So how do you kind of design a system where you kind of have, where you sort of say up to a point, it's great, in fact, we encourage it, but from a certain point on, it's no longer good. There's certain things we see always as bad, like killing others or whatever. We don't have to think twice about that. But when it comes to the pursuit of wealth, or when it comes to, say, for instance, collecting data about somebody's health, like, say, in medicine, again, there's a point at which this is really beneficial to a point, but at some point, it may become quite detrimental to society if health information was to concentrate it in very, very few hands, and so on and so forth. So this principle of accumulation and of concentration applies to many, many areas. And how do you regulate something where you sort of say, up to a point, this is what we want. There's a sort of a kind of an efficiency curve, but then there's diminishing returns from a certain point on.
Yeah.
How do you regulate that in your mind?
Well, I'm not an economist or a political scientist, but we have already examples of society trying to prevent these kinds of concentrations of economic power with antitrust laws. So it's in the same spirit. So you could say, well, let's just apply the same laws. The problem is we can't wait until that power accumulation has become so strong that, for example, it turns into political power or military power. Because keep in mind that what we're talking about is AI systems that could invent new technologies that could be used to harm. I mean, designing new biological weapons or new cyber attacks is designing new technologies. And it's just going to get more and more powerful what you could do with these systems. So that immense power, because it goes against the fundamentals of what democracy is about, needs correspondingly strong harnessing by society, by democracies, correspondingly strong democratic governance. How to do it? I think we need to innovate. So one of the interesting questions, if you want to look on the positive side, is maybe AI of the future, that's going to be much more powerful than even today's, is going to force democratic societies to innovate in the kind of democratic institutions that we need to survive the potential destabilization of society that may come with AI.
So if superhuman AI more than any other form of AI amplifies existing biases, existing trends, existing structures, it will also amplify existing power structures. And this is, of course, exactly what you're worried about. But if I am, as far as if I'm on the way up, I'm a kind of a really kind of like a happening entrepreneur, or I'm a happening politician, whatever it is, whatever the track I am on, and I'm on my way up. Why, how could it be in my interest to sort of say, oh, I'd rather not use AI or I'd rather kind of regulate so that I have less power? I mean, this is a very difficult, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? It's a very, very difficult thing in a democracy to actually to achieve. Do you have any? What's your thought on that? I mean, how do you move from a kind of an aspiration to something that becomes a political possibility?
Well, we've got to try. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. We have to be careful about the lobby of companies that have their own interests at heart, rather than society's sort of stability and well-being. I think educating the public, increasing the awareness about the dangers, is an important step, because politicians are trying to respond to many demands, and they're not experts. So whoever shouts louder in their ear might have more attention. And ordinary citizens don't get a lot of attention from our top politicians, but the media and other ways to have a democratic debate, I think, can really help to put pressure on our political system so that they listen more to the general needs of the population, rather than what rich people or companies might be pushing for.
I mean, we have seen in the US, and this is, we have seen how technology, information technology, particularly the internet, has been used over the last, course of the last 20 years very effectively. I think Obama probably was the first one who managed to pull in huge, a lot of money through small donations, which was a sort of a really democratizing of fundraising in a way, because a lot of people contributed like 10, 20, 30, $50, but in the aggregate, that really made a huge difference. And, somebody attribute his success and is in part to that. When you look at the way Donald Trump kind of campaigned, like during his election, and the help he received from all kinds of players, through misinformation, fake news, this and the other, again, very, very effectively. Now, fast forwarding to the next election, if people were to offer both sides like AI-driven or supported, campaigning tools, do you really think that the Democrats or the Republicans would say, "Oh, no, that's just not ethical. We're not going to go down that road," or do you think we're just going to carry on doing that, just at a much higher and a sort of a turbo, a supercharged kind of level?
So, I think the concern here is different politicians will have a different level of ethics. And the least ethical ones will be willing to take more advantage of tools that are in a way immoral. And it's the same problem with corporations that may choose to cut corners so that they can dominate their market. And that's true in AI as well. And for both of these cases, the solution is obvious. We need to level the playing field by setting up rules that don't favor the least ethical behavior. That's why we need regulation.
Well, that's right. But there's another point which I think you make quite strongly, and that is the kind of, if you like, the business case for opening up AI systems, so that it's part of sort of the leveling of the playing field, isn't it? If both Republicans and Democrats, for the sake of that argument, have access to the same technology, then they're kind of like fighting it out at the same level. It's one side kind of gains a sort of a technology advantage, and happens to be kind of, morally kind of somewhat, then you get that problem, no?
So it's like saying, let's allow everyone to bear very powerful weapons. That's basically the libertarian view. And at the end of the day, with the libertarian view, what you get is the law of the jungle. You get the most mean and dangerous people to dominate. That's exactly the opposite of what we want in a democracy.
No, I totally get that. I'm just talking.
So that's why you don't want to open source the very dangerous and powerful AI systems.
Yes, I get that, but I think this is sort of a short term. The next presidential elections in the US are coming up, and it's questionable whether solid regulation will be in place to to safeguard the use of AI by that stage. So the question is
Yeah.
what would happen? What would be the most meaningful kind of like measure in the very short term versus, and this is what I would like to go on to now,
Well,
the kind of the long-term perspective, which I think is something you're much more concerned about, really. And this idea of a network of institutes or non-governmental organizations is a long-term solution, isn't it?
sorry, Nico, I'm late for my next interview. So I'll have to go now. Sorry.
No worries. Well, I'm really sorry that we had this interruption, and that I thought we had till 11, but obviously that was a misunderstanding on my part. Anyway, Joshua, thank you very, very much for kind of joining me. I wish you the best of luck with your initiative with this new institute. I hope it will happen. Yeah, best of luck, and thank you very much for coming on to Reboot. Bye-bye.
Bye.